we want to welcome her. She is from Canada. Dr. Lorayne Robertson is an associate professor and former assistant dean in the Faculty of Education, a former director of the graduate programs in education at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. Her main research areas involve body image, critical health literacy, critical media literacy, digital literacy, e-learning in K through 12 and higher education, which she'll be talking about today with online learning, technology leadership in schools. Dr. Robertson also offers research support to several national organizations in Canada to support girls' health, including NEVIC, the National E-Health Respiratory for information on eating disorders. Oh, that's great. That's awesome. And she is an advocate of critical body literacy, which she defines as follows. Critical body literacy is a set of skills and understanding related to health that can be gained by students and teachers. They are open to the notion that health means more than size and shape, and health is defined and determined and constructed socially in ways far more complex than individual choice. She published this in 2013 as well, and she was the primary investigator of a KNAER NAIR project. Is that how to say it? NAIR project, mobilizing key body positive health literacy curriculum messages for grades 4 to 9. One of the ways Dr. Robertson's project mobilized knowledge was by creating a website called techbodyimage.org. The website has many lessons and short teaching units based on research on body image and critical body literacy. Robertson and Thompson published in 2012. Thomason, that is. And it also provides research summaries to help teachers address body image in developmentally appropriate ways, as well as wealth of information for parents and teachers, which includes support materials designed to build protective resilience and students to help them to resist societal pressures to match the unrealistic media idea. I think that's great. I'm really proud of you. That's excellent what you do, and I want to welcome her. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's really great to be here. Okay, so I need to. Is this going apart? So the website is called teachbodyimage.org, and is this going to work if I sit down, or it's going to be okay? Okay. Why don't we do this, and it's a little bit more conversational. I'm going to take everybody back to school with the talk this afternoon. So this afternoon, I'd like to talk about online learning. And online learning isn't necessarily better learning or stronger learning or more effective learning. That was one of the words that was used a couple of days ago at the conference. But online learning, I'm arguing today, can be a catalyst for more deliberate kinds of pedagogies. So take yourself back to school. We'll go to grad school today on our trip. Let's see. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about in-school and out-of-school learning, which connects very much with Suzanne's presentation this morning. I'm going to talk about invisible pedagogies, a little bit about how people learn, and then explore the topic of uncoverage. And coverage and uncoverage, so many topics that are actually going to be talked about today have already been talked about at the conference. And it's as if we have this massive map of how people learn. And at all points in the conference, people have been shining a spotlight on different parts of the map. It's been very exciting to be at the conference. So you might wonder how this chart came about of in-school and out-of-school pedagogies. And Resnick was the head of the AERA, which is the American Education Research Association, 25,000 members. And in her presidential address in 1987, she addressed the issue that in-school thinking and pedagogies did not match out-of-school learning. And the points she made were, first of all, in school, we asked students to solve problems by themselves. In the real world of work, and as Tony just explained, talked about, We don't solve problems by ourselves. We work in teams. In school, there's a focus on doing it in your head, example, mental math. But out in the world of work and in the real world, we solve problems with calculators and other kinds of tools, physical tools as well. Schooling focuses on learning about symbols, and I include language as a symbol in that. Whereas in the outside of school world, the focus is on making sense. So, for example, if a student does a calculation in school using only a formula, the result of their calculation could be quite unrealistic. But outside in the world of work, you know if something isn't working or not, or if it doesn't make sense. And she said that learning in school was very generalized, whereas learning in the world of work was very specific. So I think it's very interesting for those of us that are engaged with computers and technology to look at the time that Resnick made this address, which was 1987. So I don't know if this brings back memories for some of you, but I recall at one of my schools when I daisy-chained the computers and had them talking to each other. And my school superintendent told me that computers were made to work by themselves and that I shouldn't be linking them to work together. So think back to 1987, because when Resnick was speaking, she was really there, like right at the cusp of the web era and Web 2.0. So Frieri is very critical of the education system that has a banking model. Essentially, it's very teacher-centered. The teacher's at the front of the room, dispensing the information, and then students repeat the information back. Some people think that when we move to computers, that this is the shift. So when we move to online learning, it's based on technology, but there is still someone at the front of the room dispensing the information. And I have to say, in 2003, I taught my first online course. And I didn't look like the person in the picture, but pretty much the rest of it was how I taught my online course. Essentially, I did a lot of teaching in my online course that was very similar to my graduate seminars. However, in 2009, I changed universities to go to the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, and we started teaching graduate school fully online in a program called Adobe Connect. I don't know if any you know this program. That transition was like driving on a superhighway for online learning, and I'm going to show you some slides that gives you a sense of being in that classroom, because in the real time, the synchronous online classroom, many things are happening in that classroom at the same time. Students are coming and going. Their cameras are on and off. Often in my classes, students are leading the class, taking charge of the class. So this transition for me was a big shift. And when I had the big shift, I started to rethink my pedagogy. So here's a screenshot. It was early in one of my courses that I taught just this past semester. So not all of the students are there. It looks like there are around 20 of my students are present at that point. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see there is an attendee list. And it's not your glasses. I purposely blurred the slides so you can't read my students' names and so on. So I just blurred it a bit. But you can see that I've just asked them a question because a number of students have given a green check to say, yep, you're okay, go ahead. Now the way, I'm going to tell you this story because there's a contrast between week 1 and week 2 in this class. So this is week 1, and what I have done is what I always do in my online classes. I give all of the students host status, which means that they have the same rights that I have to work the screen, to change pods and organize. So what you see on the far left is my course outline. It's draft, and I'm going through the course outline with them. We have a very busy chat box going, so I enlarge the chat box whenever there's a lot going on. And some students are talking, so when they are a host, they can interrupt the class at any point to ask a question or make a comment. So this is the way that I usually teach. But then something happened. In this class, for the first time, someone kept changing the PowerPoint slides, kept turning off our rights to speak, kept manipulating all of the events on the screen. And no matter, as you know, Canadians are very polite. I was giving a number of very polite professor prompts for this person to stop doing it, and it didn't stop. So after the class, I was faced with this dilemma. What actually happened was, so let's see, this is my 7th year of teaching in this way, and nothing like this had ever happened. So it posed quite an interesting problem. So after the class, some students contacted me through Blackboard, that's our LMS, our learning management system, and they said, well, you know, Lorayne, some of the other professors just lecture in Adobe Connect. They don't have the students doing all of the things that you have the students do. So perhaps you should go back to just lecturing. So that was one student's opinion. Another student wrote, you need to spend more time on etiquette in the class. So it was pretty interesting to hear all of their comments. But what occurred to me in all of this is that my pedagogy for online teaching was very much a hidden pedagogy to my students. They weren't aware, it's that tacit knowledge again, they weren't aware of what was going on. So this is how I started week 2 in the same class. Now you'll notice I have a small group of people who are hosts. These are students who had been interacting with me during the week about problem solving and what to do with the situation, because literally it had shut the class down. It was in the 3rd hour of class. I teach for 3 hours at a time. But still, it was disruptive. So we started out this way with 5 students, I think, 4 students as hosts and myself. And you can see that I started out with only myself on screen with video rights and only myself talking. And so we talked about what had happened the previous week. We also talked about the fact that we'd been really trying to talk to the person who was changing the screen, but that person didn't have their audio on or somehow wasn't able to hear us. So, it resolved itself. The students who were the hosts and I talked again after that class, and the following week, I made everybody hosts again. And so the students all continued, like the students love to post videos, they love to put PowerPoints up, they like to run polls, and they love to take charge and do things in the graduate class, and it's a good experience for them. But it was that moment when I was kind of in the middle of that predicament that prompted me to think about the fact that most of the ways that I teach are hidden pedagogies. So this is just another example of what happens in the Adobe Connect classroom. There are breakout rooms where the students can move. This is a student presentation actually, and it's shown on reflection in action and reflection on action and critical pedagogy. So the student that organized this discussion wanted to have 4 groups. Students could choose their own groups. They move themselves into a breakout room, turn on their cameras and talk, and then come back and report out. So I hope that just gives you a little sense of of what happens in the class. I chose this slide to show you on the far right, there's something called layouts in Adobe Connect. And actually, if a student wants to do a presentation, or if I have 3 or 4 activities I'm going to do that night, I can have different layouts for each of them, and the room changes instantly. So what I love about the Adobe Connect environment is that I can really set up a classroom in advance for the students for their learning. So where are we going with online blended learning in the future? I was really prompted by what happened in the class and the kind of pedagogy to start looking more at how people learn. So this is Bransford et al. 2000. This is a huge American study on how people learn. This is one of their earlier maps of how people learn. So you can see, you'll recognize some of the categories. They were beginning to identify that you have technology-enhanced learning. People learn through lecture, learn skills, learn through inquiry, learn as individuals and groups. And what I think is pretty interesting is how this plan of how people learn, and they call it the How People Learn framework, began to evolve. Because this is what it looked like 4 years later. So Bransford et al. Identified 4 lenses that we would use to identify when quality learning is happening. It's learner-centered, it's knowledge-centered, it's assessment-centered, and it takes place within a community of learners that make it a safe place. And they call this the How People Learn framework. It's widely available and a very large American study. So Anderson et al. No, this is Anderson, just Anderson, looked at what does learner-centered, knowledge-centered, and teacher-centered look like in an online environment. So what you're beginning to see here with the theorizing are the arrows. The teachers interacting, and we're talking about connections. It goes back to this morning where we were talking about concepts and connections. The teachers interacting with the content. The learners are interacting with the content. The learners are interacting with each other. They're also interacting with the teacher. So what interfered or advanced the thinking at this point was hypertext, was the use of hypertext. Because the use of hypertext allows different things to be happening at the same time. It allows students to organize their learning. They can start to see tasks and subtasks. And they really began to personalize their learning. So this is where Anderson ended up in 2004 with trying to show a model of how learning happens in an online environment. And his chapter is, his book is widely available. It's open access. So this is his theory of online learning in the era of the semantic web. So whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, you have all of these connections happening within a community of inquiry, but also with structured learning resources, independent study and collaborative study. Now we examine the issue, which is really at the forefront of a lot of professors thinking about coverage in a course and uncoverage in a course. So 2 thinkers that have worked on this area are Wiggins and McTighe, who have written Understanding by Design. And when they talk about examining your content, and instead of looking at the coverage of your content, look at the big ideas, or what they call enduring understandings. In other words, when your student who is 32 years old right now in your class is 40, what does he recall that was important that he used in his lifetime that was taught in your class? So there's this tension in teaching between depth and breadth or coverage. And to uncover something deeply is to get at the assumptions or the knowledge that students already have. And I want to show you some examples of how I do this. I really like the work of Reed, who writes about, she's a teacher, a professor of pedagogy, and she writes about coverage versus uncoverage. And she calls uncoverage constructive and interrogative type of learning that gets at the higher order thinking. So she uses two concepts in her teaching. One of them is problem-based. She uses problem-based learning very close to inquiry learning, as I read it. But she also uses a concept called discovery drafting, which I've incorporated into my classes, where I ask students to send me a draft whenever they want to send me a draft and get feedback. And it has deepened and strengthened the quality of the learning in the class. It's not my idea. I picked it up from her. So, the first quote, I'm not a fan of technology, I'm a fan of pedagogy, of understanding how people learn and the most effective learning methods. But technology enables some exciting changes. And then the second quote, the technology itself is not transformative. It's the school, the pedagogy that is transformative. I really like these quotes. They really resonate with me. Bernstein actually was writing in 1975 about invisible pedagogy because he was studying primary classrooms. And he was following what the teacher was doing, which was nothing like the banking model or the teacher-directed classroom or the lecture room. In fact, you couldn't see what the teacher was doing. What the teacher had done was set up the environment so that the students directed themselves in a purposeful way toward the learning activities. I put forward the idea that the design of the online learning environment is a very similar invisible pedagogy. What I'd like to show you next is our 4 examples of student work. This is, excuse me, this is a recent course, actually I'm just finishing it this month, on the foundations of leadership. It's a graduate course. So the assignment for the students, the first assignment for the students was to write a job description for a leader in their industry. So in my class, I have people from criminal justice. I have doctors who want to instruct their patients. I have nurses who want to develop online videos for people to administer shots at home. I have teachers, principals. So a wide range of experience of the students who are in the class. So this is one group. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each, but you could see that they thought technology was important because they have the change leader, early adopters, early majority adopters, late majority adopters, and laggards, which is an application of implementation theory, change theory. They also have leadership styles, up on the sales, authoritarian, democratic, laissez-faire. Excuse me. And of course, each of their, so I think they used Prezi as the software background, so each of their circles or their bubbles in the water had information that they had developed. So let's compare this to another group from the same class. So this group envisioned leadership using a Poplet. So this was live. And so they had live, they had videos that we could click and use. They walked us through their Poplet, but this was, really a Poplet is best understood in its live form. Interesting, when this group presented, they didn't identify that the colors had significance for their concepts, their larger concepts. And afterwards, when we debriefed, they realized that they could have helped their viewers understand it. This is another way that a group organized, and you can see that the yellow are the values of the leader, the pink, the issues the leader faces, the blue, the skills of the leader, the green, the knowledge, and then the context and structures within which leaders have to work. They organized as kind of a pink color on the right-hand side. But here you see more development of higher order thinking. Can you see that? Can you see how they're starting to organize and cluster their concepts? And it's exactly what the talk this morning was talking about. As they began to analyze and evaluate, their structures or their concepts became much clearer. And then finally, this is the fourth group. They had a lot less text than any of the other groups. But when you looked at how they had organized and categorized the key concepts for leadership, based on the readings that we'd been doing in our class, you could see that they were right on in their thinking and how they had conceptualized this. So I used those 4 examples as just a way to show that, I still have students do a paper in class, but there are so many ways that are available to us with online teaching. And of course, the students, each group presented their ideas to the class. So it's not what the software does, it's what the user does. So here are some of my summary thoughts. First of all, in some ways, some classrooms have not changed much in 70 years. Secondly, power. Student-centered online learning means giving students ownership in the class. And technology, my thought is that technology should be at the point of instruction. So this is just a little humor to end with today as the teacher texts, isn't this great? Text me your homework. And the students' phone. I don't know what it's like in your jurisdictions, but I know that in our K-12 jurisdictions that most of them are moving toward bring your own device to school. And so the students have their phones or tablets in their classrooms. And this is the one I thought I would end with. What we need to do is to put the technology in the hands of the students in the classes. So this is just, this is called Makey. It actually is a simulation of a mouse. So you can hook up, the different left, right, up and down mouse elements to this. It's just a little card. It's a little plastic card about this big. And you can have the students, it's like logo or robotics, a simple form of robotics. And then you can hook it up to software and use it with different kinds of software. I actually used it with a game of Tetris. So there are lots of applications for it. But again, this is an inexpensive piece of technology. The person who showed it to me was using it in a grade 6 class to teach beginning programming, coding. And I just think that the world of teaching is being invented as we speak. And we need to take our pedagogies and make them deliberate to work with technology and not accept previous pedagogies as good enough. That's it. Thank you.